The popular story is that Polaroid, like Kodak, missed digital photography. The popular story is wrong. In 1996, Polaroid shipped the PDC 2000. It was a 1-megapixel digital camera that retailed for around $3,000. It was professional grade for its time. Polaroid's research labs had been working on digital imaging since the late 1980s. By the late 1990s, Polaroid had digital camera lines, scanner lines, digital printing systems, and a plan to enter the consumer digital photography market head-on. They shipped the cameras, they opened the digital divisions, they executed the pivot that the popular story says they failed to attempt. In October of 2001, the company filed for bankruptcy. This is the channel's 10th episode, and it is a very specific kind of story. It's the kind where management did the obvious right thing and it didn't matter, because the thing they sold for 60 years stopped being a thing anyone was buying. Quick recap. Every company is shaped by 4 forces: market, the conditions they operate in; money, how they're funded, and what that costs them; management, the decisions made at the top; moment, the timing and events they didn't choose. All 4 are always present. Only one is decisive. Polaroid's answer is the second time the channel has named market. The first was Tower Records, and it's the cleanest version of the lesson. Sometimes the market is the killer. Polaroid had one market. It made instant film cameras and the proprietary instant film those cameras used. The cameras were sold close to break even. The film was sold at a high margin. This is the classic razor and blades model, the printer and ink model before printers. And Polaroid had been perfecting it since 1948 when Edwin Land introduced the first instant camera at Boston's Jordan Marsh department store. For about 50 years, this was a great business. Through the 1970s, Polaroid had North American instant photo film market share above 90%. Even after Kodak entered instant film in 1976 and was eventually forced out by patent suits in 1986, Polaroid's franchise was effectively unchallenged. Annual revenue peaked at about $2.3 billion in the early 1990s. Now consider what digital photography actually did to Polaroid's market. It did not just give them a new competitor, it eliminated the cost per photo. The whole point of an instant camera was that you got a picture immediately, and the trade-off was that each picture cost roughly $1 in film. Digital cameras by the early 2000s made the cost per picture effectively zero. Then mobile phones with cameras made the device itself effectively free. The instant print proposition, pay $1, get a print in your hand right now, got squeezed from both sides. The right now part was matched by the LCD screen on every digital camera. The in your hand part was matched by photo printing kiosks and home printers. By 2005, the social and practical use cases that justified Polaroid film were almost entirely served by other technology. This is the difference between Kodak's market and Polaroid's market. Kodak's core business, film photography in general, was being replaced, but Kodak had related markets to retreat into: commercial printing, healthcare imaging, photographic chemicals, professional cinema. Polaroid's market was a single proposition built around a single product format. When that proposition stopped being valuable, there was no adjacent market to retreat to. Market, a single proposition franchise that the world stopped needing. Polaroid's financial structure was healthier than most companies on this channel. The company had been public since 1957, paid dividends through most of its history, and carried a manageable debt load through the 1990s. The 1991 Kodak settlement, about $925 million from Kodak for patent infringement on instant photography, gave Polaroid a one-time cash injection roughly equivalent to a year of revenue. That windfall masked the underlying problem for several years. Polaroid had cash to invest, and it did invest in digital imaging research in new instant camera lines like the iZone for teenagers in 1999, and in attempts to enter adjacent markets. Through the late 1990s, the company looked solvent. Underneath, the film franchise was already cracking. Volume was declining. Consumer demand for instant film prints fell every year. By the time the digital camera market reached real consumer scale in 2000-2001, Polaroid's existing customer base was already dwindling, and the digital products it had launched were not generating enough revenue to replace the lost film sales. The October 2001 bankruptcy was a Chapter 11 reorganization, not a wipeout. The company was restructured and sold to Bank One's One Equity Partners in 2002 for about $255 million. In 2005, the rebuilt Polaroid was sold again to a Minnesota businessman named Tom Petters for about $426 million. Petters used Polaroid as part of what was later proven to be a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. He was arrested in September of 2008 and convicted in 2009. Polaroid, dragged into the wreckage, filed for bankruptcy a second time in December of 2008. Money was a complication, especially in the second bankruptcy. But the core franchise had already been gutted by 2001. The Petters fraud finished off a company that the market had already finished off 4 years earlier. Money. A complication, not the deepest cause. This is the force that surprises people most when they look closely. Polaroid's management did not refuse to engage with digital. They engaged with it actively, multiple times. Through the 1990s, Polaroid had a digital imaging division working on cameras, scanners, medical imaging, and printing systems. The PDC 2000 in 1996 was a real product, used by professional photographers and journalists. The company partnered with major technology companies on digital imaging integration. There were attempts to build digital photo printers, devices that could print instant-style prints from digital files, under brands like the Polaroid Pogo, which actually shipped much later, in 2008. The structural problem was the financial logic of the pivot, not the willingness to attempt it. Polaroid's profit for 50 years had come from selling film at a high margin. Switching to digital meant selling cameras and printers as one-time purchases, which is a much harder margin business with much more competition. Canon, Nikon, Sony, Olympus, and Kodak itself were all stronger in cameras than Polaroid. HP, Canon, and Epson were stronger in printers. So even when Polaroid built credible digital products, those products had to compete in markets where Polaroid was a weak entrant. The brand was strong, but the brand had been built around instant prints, not around imaging hardware in general. By the late 1990s, Polaroid's executive team understood this. They tried to extend the brand into adjacent consumer electronics, DVD players, portable televisions, photo frames, using the Polaroid name as a license. This worked for a while financially, but it diluted the brand. By the mid-2000s, Polaroid, the brand, stood for inexpensive consumer electronics, rather than for the science-driven imaging company it had been. Could a different management team have done better? Possibly. The Edwin Land era ended in 1980. The post-Land leadership made some debatable calls, most notably the various brand licensing deals of the 2000s, when Polaroid started appearing on commodity consumer electronics. But the central decision management had to make, pivot away from instant film into digital, was correctly identified and actively pursued. The pivot just didn't work because the destination market was already populated. Management engaged with the right problem, could not solve it. Two timing facts matter for Polaroid. The first is that consumer digital photography reached scale faster than anyone in the imaging industry expected. Between 1998 and 2003, digital camera shipments globally went from a few million units a year to over 40 million. Within 7 years, digital had moved from professional novelty to consumer default. The second is that camera-equipped mobile phones reached scale even faster. The first commercial camera phone, the Sharp JSH04, shipped in Japan in November of 2000. By 2003, camera phones were a mainstream feature globally. By 2007, smartphone cameras were good enough for most casual photography use cases. These two timing facts compressed Polaroid's window. A more stretched-out digital transition might have given the company time to build a viable digital business before the film franchise collapsed. The actual timing did not allow that. Film volume started falling in the late 90s. Digital scale arrived in the early 2000s. Camera phones arrived right behind. There was no decade of dual-track existence in which Polaroid could fund a digital pivot off declining film profits. So moment was real and it was unkind, but it is not the deepest force here. The deepest force is that Polaroid's particular business, selling a proprietary film format with a high per-shot cost, had no equivalent in the digital era. The moment compressed the timeline. The market was what closed the door. Moment, an accelerant, not the cause. So let's grade them out. Market, a single proposition franchise that the world stopped needing. Money, a complication, especially in the Petters chapter, but not the deepest cause. Management engaged with the right problem and could not solve it. Moment, an accelerant on a death that was already underway. Polaroid did the things the popular story says they failed to do. They built digital cameras. They tried digital printers. They invested in research. They pivoted. The pivot didn't save them because their market was not a market they could pivot inside of. The cost per shot economics of instant film stopped making sense, and there was no adjacent business that preserved the high-margin film economics in a digital form. Here's the cross-episode lesson, and this is where the framework starts paying off. The Kodak episode named management as decisive. Kodak had the future and chose not to commit because the film business was too profitable to cannibalize. The Polaroid episode names market as decisive. Polaroid did commit repeatedly and could not find a market to commit into. These are not just two different verdicts. They are two different kinds of disruption. In Kodak's case, the disruption was to a category that survived in a new form, and the question was whether the incumbent could move into the new form. In Polaroid's case, the disruption was to a category that did not survive in a new form. Instant film had no digital equivalent that preserved the same business. That distinction matters. When you watch a company facing disruption, the diagnostic question to ask is, in the post-disruption world, does the underlying business proposition still exist in some form? If yes, the question is whether management commits. If no, the question is whether management has anywhere to retreat to. Those are very different problems. Polaroid had the second problem. Tower Records had the second problem. Most of the deaths on this channel are the first problem, but the second one shows up too. And when it does, the framework calls it market. Next case is comeback. Marvel Comics filed for bankruptcy in 1996, and a decade later was the most profitable movie business in Hollywood. The framework will figure out how. Subscribe.